You are in a vintage courtroom. Everywhere you look, there's oiled wood. An elevated and ornate judge's bench, where an old man with a white wig and a shiny black robe looks out over his fiefdom. A simple witness stand where a faceless person sits before a chrome microphone. A long jury box surrounded by a carved rail and filled with concerned faces and fidgeting bodies. Worn floorboards, faded paneling, and even huge dark beams overhead. Looking around, you realize you're sitting at one of the counsel tables. A man in a suit standing at the other table is talking to the jury and pausing occasionally to point at you. Eventually, it occurs to you that you are not merely an observer here. You are on trial for crimes unknown. The prosecutor is making his closing arguments to the jury. He argues that you are guilty of all kinds of vague crimes. Most of the time, you can't quite make out his description of your misdeeds. It seems he's recounting the cardinal sins. You catch part of his plea to the jury. Envy, sloth, lust. You want to stand up and say something, but you can't think of any defense. You're not even sure what you're defending against. These acts are the acts of the recidivists, of one engaged in sustained self-idolatry, you hear him say, while you see a few heads in the jury box nod slightly. You're beginning to despair. The prosecutor deals a final blow and swiftly turns and takes his seat. You become aware of the figure seated next to you at about the time she rises, walks around the counsel table, and moves toward the jury. She's dressed in a white business suit with a light blue scarf, her scarlet hair pinned up neatly on her head. She removes the thin black frames from her eyes, folds them in her hands, and ever so sweetly begins to explain to the good people of the jury your virtues. Hope, compassion, curiosity, playfulness, courage, generosity. She considers each juror in turn, holding their individual attention completely, even bringing a tear to the eyes of a few. When she's finished speaking, she stands for a moment longer, making eye contact with each juror. Then she thanks them for their attention and turns back towards you. When you look up at her, the features on her face are obscured, eclipsed by a great light coming from behind her head. As she walks back toward you, there's a roar of thunder in the distance. Then all the wooden walls and beams of the courtroom fall away. Blue sky shows through gathering clouds that begin to move slowly overhead. Giraffes and elephants stand up from the jury box, and a hyena abandons a briefcase at the prosecutor's table and flees what used to be the courtroom. She stands beside you once more, puts her arm around your shoulder. Then she leans in toward you and tells you in a polished and professional tone, but with what might be a slight smirk, "You're free to go."